Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. And today, the Christmas season is past us now. We're into 2024, and Happy New Year to you all. But I have not quite got out of the Christmas spirit because this week I read this anthology called Christmas and Other Horrors, edited by Ellen Datlow, who is apparently a horror legend, although I've never heard of her. And it's called a Winter Solstice Anthology. And as someone who likes the winter solstice a lot, and considers himself a pagan and celebrates the winter solstice, this seemed right up my alley. This book was given to me as a Christmas present on Christmas Eve by my sister, for which I am very grateful. And it sounded right up my alley. It sounded like the kind of thing I would love. And I love the cover art, and I love the idea because I love the spooky aspect of Christmas. I love the mysterious, ghostly aspect of Christmas. There's a Victorian tradition of Christmas ghost stories, of which Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol is the most famous, but there's many others. And I love that aspect of it, and I think it's great. And so I was really excited to read this. And while some of the stories in here I really liked, and some of them were dealt with folklore and were pretty spooky and atmospheric, I thought were good, a lot of them missed the mark for me. And I was trying to figure out why they missed the mark for me. And I was trying to figure out the common thread for why I was not enjoying this book, which I should have been enjoying more than I actually was. And I basically came up with this idea of doing this video about what makes Christmas spooky, what makes it magical, and what you can do to capture that or fail to capture that in fiction form. Because I think that's what is happening here. I think it's a failure to capture the magic of the season. And in order to capture the magic of the season, you have to understand what it is. And it's something I'm very interested in. The bookshelf behind me contains several hundred books on the subject of magic. It's something I care a lot about. And so I gave it some thought. And to me, the thing that I love about Christmas, one of the things I love about Christmas, I love the holiday in general. Although I'm not a Christian, I love the secular aspect of it. And I love just I grew up with it, and I have an emotional connection to it. And there's a lot about it that I really love. And I think what it comes down to, and why it's considered spooky by some people, including me, has to do with the magical element, which is the unknown element, or the not quite understood element to it. That's the nature of magic. That's the nature of horror. That's the nature of all these things, is when things are not quite fully understood. They're a little spooky because we don't know how they work. We don't know what could happen. And to me, the season, the winter solstice, the Yule, the Christmas is all about these kind of slightly unexplained, mysterious things. It's like icicles in churchyards. It's the shortest day of the year. It's darkness. It's primordial boreal forests filled with pine trees and who knows what kind of creatures. It's mysterious presents showing up at the foot of your bed or underneath your Christmas tree on the morning when you're not quite sure how they got there. It's a saint who flies through the air on a sleigh with magical reindeer and can squeeze down chimneys, and who's never seen, no matter how hard you try to see him, you can never see him. It's the magical elves that make the toys that live up in the North Pole or in Lapland. All these elements, it's the fires and the colored lights and the fact that you're bringing trees indoors and keeping them inside your house and decorating them as slightly surreal, strange traditions. It's music, bonfires, all these things that are just the collision of the warm, firelit glow of the indoors and the icy cold chill of outdoors. The weather of the season, all of that contributes to making it a magical time of year. And I think you have to tap into those sort of things if you want to write a spooky Christmas story. And a lot of these stories failed to capture that to me because fundamentally what they're doing is they're mixing mundanity and they're mixing non-magical elements into this thing. And they're not really focusing on the things that I would have focused on if I were writing this. And I actually have written a collection of Christmassy stories called Yuletide Tales, available on Amazon.com in paperback if you're interested in that. And I tried to capture that. But I think when you're dealing with this kind of magic, you really have to be careful to avoid the mundane. And it's why, one of the things I really love about the Harry Potter books, for example, is you never see anyone talking on a cell phone. There's kind of brief mention of computer games that the Muggles use and stuff like that, but it's never focused on. And presumably these technologies exist, but they're put in the background because when you have someone talking on a cell phone, it kind of it's so mundane, it sort of robs the wizarding world of its magic. And I think that this is a mistake that a lot of these stories make. And I think that they do it largely in order to avoid cliches, which I can appreciate. You don't want to do the same thing over and over again. You want to mix it up, try new things. But I think cliches exist for a reason sometimes, and if you lean too far away from them, you lose something. And so, I'll give a couple of examples from the book. A couple of the stories take place in the Southern Hemisphere at Christmas. Okay, that's fine. The Southern Hemisphere celebrates Christmas just like everybody else, but to me, it robs something of the mysterious quality of it, because instead of now the darkness and the snow and all the things we associate with Christmas, it's a hot summer day. It's the middle of July, basically, although it's the middle of December, but for them, it might as well be the middle of July. And obviously, I'm based in the Northern Hemisphere, so I'm biased, but it's hard for me to get invested and sucked into a story about the mystery of the season when it's a blazing sun outside. It just doesn't have that same feel to it. So there's a couple of stories like that. There's a real kind of focus on multiculturalism in the book. It seems like they're deliberately trying to intersperse the European folklore and North American folklore stories with some other parts of the world, which is fine. But I think the Southern Hemisphere stuff, it just doesn't work from a Yuletide, winter solstice anthology when it's supposed to be about the shortest day of the year and the darkness and all that. Didn't work for me. Another thing that's mundane is the language the characters use. In a lot of the stories, there's a lot of slang, there's a lot of swearing, there's modern talk. It doesn't have that sort of mystical feel to it. It feels a little bit too just ordinary. And, there's a lot of technology, people talking on cell phones and stuff like that. It doesn't really feel mystical to me. And then the most glaring culprit that I found in a couple of these stories was politics, because there's nothing more mundane than politics, and there's nothing that robs a story of its magic more than politics. So the one I was most disappointed in, for example, is about the Welsh tradition of the Mary Lwyd. And the Mary Lwyd is an amazing, fascinating tradition from Wales, and I'm obsessed with all things Welsh culture, as people who will watch my channel will know. People carry a horse skull on a stick around the village, and they knock at the doors, and there's a sort of singing contest that takes place where the people carrying the horse skull are demanding entrance and refreshments and drinks and treats, and the people in the house are trying to get them to go away and denying them, and whoever wins the singing battle gets their way. Incredible tradition. The horse skull is super spooky. I love that. The story in this anthology that focuses on that tradition is basically a thinly disguised rant against Airbnbs raising property prices and making housing unaffordable. Now, okay, whatever your opinion on Airbnbs is, fine. But it's hard to get sucked into the eeriness of this tradition, this amazing horse skull floating around, the singing battle, the cold outdoors colliding with the warm refreshments from indoors, the hot mulled wine and stuff like that. It's hard to get sucked into the spirit of that story when you're being made to listen to a political point about property values. It just didn't work for me. And there's another one where the focus is on global warming. And again, it's like when you're bringing science and politics and public policy into a story that's supposed to be about mystery and magic and imagination, it just spoils it for me. It doesn't work at all. So overall, I think that the authors in this story were they're trying to do something different. They don't want to do the same old, type of Christmas stories that have been being told since the Victorian period. And I can appreciate that. But I think if your goal was to evoke an emotion or evoke a feeling, and when the feeling is supposed to be one of fear and awe and wonder and mystery and all this stuff that we associate with Christmas, I just think it fails when you kind of introduce those mundane elements. So I was overall somewhat disappointed, sorry, Audrey, in the Christmas and Other Horrors anthology, although some of the stories I did quite like. The first story in the anthology is probably my favorite. It's about this Austrian tradition of these creepy kind of bird-beaked specters who go around and inspect people's homes to see if they've been kept clean. And if they are kept clean, they get a reward. And if they're not kept clean, they get a punishment. There's a lot of that kind of rewarding and punishment going on with Krampus and Santa Claus himself and all those things. And I love that kind of stuff. That story was quite spooky and it really captured the kind of mystery of the season. It takes place in Austria, which is sort of a magical place. I've been to Austria once and I thought it was incredible. That was great. There's a story about kind of flipping the Santa Claus myth on its head and having a child being kidnapped by Santa that I thought was really good. These are all kind of early in the collection. There's some other good ones later on as well. But they were in a minority, I think, and the majority of stories just didn't quite click for me. So I wanted to have this little meditation on the nature of the Christmas holiday and its relationship to magic and its relationship to horror and fear and wonder and spookiness and all those cool emotions that I really like and that are the things I look for in the fiction that I read. and just kind of talk about that and have a conversation about it. So using this as a jumping off point. If you are interested in Christmas horror stories, this is something you may want to pick up, depending on whether you share my opinions about the nature of horror, or you may not if you are in agreement with me that introducing these sort of mundane elements sort of spoils it. So that's really all I have to talk about today. I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion, and I'll be back again next week with another book review for you. Can't wait to see what it's going to be, but you'll have to wait and see because I don't know what it's going to be myself yet. Got to get back to reading. But thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. Leave me comments down below giving your thoughts on these things. Maybe you've read this anthology and you have opinions on it. I'm always interested to go and look at the Goodreads reviews of these books and see if people agree with me or disagree with me. This is generally pretty well reviewed, but there's a few people who agree with me on it. So yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts. Leave comments down below. And until then, I will catch you next time. I've been your host, Logan Albright. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later.